We're going to draw together, and first and foremost a big thank you to all of you for being here. Obviously we've had, like everybody, hiatuses with sharing these moments. I think it was last probably 2019, 2 years back, that we shared here, and it's good to be together again. Thank you as a community for turning out and supporting, because that's what it's all about. We have a memorial now for this community round about here, which was a community which was so heavily and deeply represented in, of course, both of the major conflicts of the 20th century, the First and Second World Wars, and there's been a tradition since then from Dennistoun and hereabouts of so many going into the armed services. It is our privilege as always to welcome particular representatives of the armed services here for us today to lead for us in our act of remembrance this afternoon. It's always really nice, as we all know, when we see youngsters turn out from our local schools and from the community, because of course remembrance is something which we hand down to the next generations to remember as we in our generations have sought to remember. And a real appreciation for yourselves coming along, representing local schools and of course the community at large, and being here with us today. Thank you so very much. In each case, it is appreciated. Thanks very much to yourselves, who just look good and are here to be security by the looks of it. No. And thanks very much for drawing together as a community today, as always you do. You are a good community. We draw together this weekend of Remembrance. It very often happens that Remembrance weekend can coincide with one of the major moments of the Second World War. This weekend saw perhaps the most notorious and remembered bombing raid on the United Kingdom, of course the bombing of Coventry, which took place, well, the 14th of November, tomorrow, which will be Remembrance Day. And when we look back now at the Second World War, we realise in the context of history that what really defined the Second World War more than any other war, obviously before, but certainly since, was it was so much a war of aerial bombardment. And the air raids were what characterised the Second World War, obviously across the whole United Kingdom, across Europe, and of course in the Far East. And if we remember one thing about that war, it was the devastation of cities, that form of warfare which brought death from the sky to hundreds and thousands of civilians, men, women and children struggling for safety in the cities. And if this weekend we are remembering Coventry, then of course throughout the year there's never a weekend that goes by when we wouldn't and couldn't be remembering one or other city or town devastated by air raids. And the air raids of course got worse and more severe and more catastrophic as the war went on. And of course we remember the likes of Dresden, and the most devastating air raid of the whole Second War, which was of course on Tokyo in March 1945, and of course the atomic bombs at the end of the war on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. We, perhaps this year, looking back, mark the hundreds of thousands who remained unnamed and unremembered, who died in the air raids of the Second World War. And of course those raids affected Glasgow, but primarily in Scotland we remember, of course, Port Glasgow and Greenock, the Forgotten Blitz, and Clydebank. And any of you who have been to the Clydebank Memorial at Kilbowie Church in Clydebank will see what air raids meant. The numbers of children and grandparents who were killed in that raid because the men were away at the war and the women were in the factories, which were largely untouched. And it was family homes and tenements which were demolished one after another through Clydebank. And of course in Port Glasgow and Greenock, which tend, as I say, to be not so remembered. And if every year there is a focus, I think this year perhaps we remember, because it's Coventry weekend, the devastation of air raids and all that cost, and the courage of fire crews, police, the emergency services of those days struggling to cope with the appalling experience of being bombed. And Coventry is a good example. It was the first bombing raid where it was thought through to an exactitude, whereby the raiders hit first the waterworks so that the fire crews wouldn't be able to use water to put out the flames, and they used for the first time the incendiaries to start a firestorm, and that was the model that was used for the rest of the Second World War. And we remember that in many ways so cruel, so random, so inevitably inaccurate form of warfare which killed children, women, men, grandparents indiscriminately. We remember that. But we come together this armistice weekend to remember, of course, the end of one war, the First World War, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. We remember the end of that catastrophic war. And we all, I think, will have family members back the generations who died in the First World War. I don't think any family in the land was really unscathed, and we all therefore inherit the cost of that First World War and the damage of the Second World War similarly. But it's helpful, I think, always on these days when we have our veterans with us, because we remember, of course, that war didn't stop with the First World War and the Second World War. It continues to this day. At present, of course, Yemen in the Horn of Africa, devastated by terrible civil war. Syria ongoing, Sudan. Similarly, there are so many countries scarred by war right now. And in the intervening period since the end of the Second World War, of course, we in this country have had service personnel serving all over the world. Korea, Malaya, Kenya, Northern Ireland, Falkland Islands, of course the British Army on the Rhine, and of course Afghanistan and Iraq in more recent times, and a myriad other theatres of war and conflict in which British service personnel have been involved from, all parts of the world. And today we seek here to remember them. And thank you for turning out to show a demonstration of thanks and respect and appreciation for all those who serve on our behalf, and for all the uniformed services on which we rely. And yes, it's the military who go out and do their stuff, but we are aware, and perhaps as we remember the air raids of the Second World War, we're aware of how much we depend similarly on our fire service, our ambulance service, our police service, and all the civilian units who look after us and keep us safe and help us in the times when we need that help. So today we take this time to remember. Let us bow our heads together. For they shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today. In recognition of that sacrifice on our behalves, I'd like now, if I may, to invite forward our wreath bearers for today. If I could start, sir, with yourself. Well done. Thank you so much for doing this. It's right to bring forward. Thank you very much indeed. And now, sir, I'd like to bring forward your wreath.